In Los Angeles, forensics experts try to make sense of a photo shoot that crossed the line from daring to deadly. In the Pacific Northwest, law enforcement hunts a brutal predator whose lust for violence is reaching fever pitch. As detectives follow the footsteps of a killer, a double homicide investigation spurs an international manhunt. The law has no jurisdiction in the human mind, where a killer's twisted motives may forever defy police. But actions cannot defy science. Through forensics, detectives can track even the most deranged criminals and put an end to their lethal obsessions. In Los Angeles, where image is everything, a pretty face and sexy body can launch a woman into the spotlight. But not everyone makes it that far. In November 1995, a model went to a photo shoot and vanished. Days went by without a word. Worried friends and parents had no clue to her whereabouts. Then, she caught the eye of a passing stranger. One afternoon, a trash collector working along the Angeles Crest Highway found a daydream in the litter.
The 27-year-old model.
Several days later, he saw the woman's face again.
Linda Sobeck disappeared 7 days ago.
She was Linda Sobeck, a model from Hermosa Beach who had been missing for 5 days. He contacted the police about his odd discovery.
Yeah, hi, this is Frank Artino. Yeah, I'm calling about that girl that you have on TV that's missing.
A former LA Raider cheerleader, 27-year-old Sobeck was riding a wave of success. Her schedule was packed with shoots for magazine covers and calendar spreads. She had just landed a part on a popular sitcom. The day she disappeared, Linda told her mother that she would be at a remote photo shoot with a photographer named Chuck. Her mother didn't know who Chuck was or where they were going. Linda promised to call her after the shoot. No call ever came. The trash collector showed police where he dumped the roadside trash.
Yeah, I threw him in here with one of these bags, but this was this bag right here.
This bag?
There, they found more photographs, pages ripped from Sobeck's appointment book, and a makeup bag. They also found a clue they hoped would lead them to the model. The receipt was for the loan of a sport utility vehicle, a prototype that hadn't been released yet. It was signed by Charles Rathbun and dated November 16th, the same day Sobeck disappeared. It seemed the mysterious Chuck had been identified. Rathbun, police learned, was a respected photographer who specialized in pictures of new cars. He was considered one of the best in his field. Rathbun said he didn't know how his receipt got mixed in with Linda Sobeck's belongings, but admitted that he was probably the last person to have seen her. On the morning of her disappearance, he said, Sobeck asked him to meet her at a restaurant parking lot. She was looking for work. He wasn't interested. Detective Mike Robinson of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department took Rathbun's statement.
He said that he met with her briefly in the Denny's parking lot, looked at her portfolio, and told her that he had a very tight schedule and pushed her out of the car and left her there at noon on the day she disappeared. He said his last observation of her was standing in the parking lot unlocking her white Datsun.
Sobeck's car was still in the parking lot, but there the trail grew cold. Rathbun, the last to have seen her, was the only lead to the missing model. Police asked him to come to the station for a more complete interview. He didn't keep his appointment.
He called later that day and said that he had car problems and then never showed up and never called back.
But police learned that Rathbun had contacted a friend in law enforcement. She had received a rambling fax in which he confessed to accidentally killing Sobeck. He also threatened to kill himself. Police rushed to his house. They found him drunk and incoherent. He was taken into custody. In jail, Rathbun gave police a second account of what happened. He admitted that he'd lied when he said he hadn't hired Linda Sobeck. He recounted a tragic accident at a dry lake bed in the Mojave Desert. Rathbun wanted to photograph Linda taking the rugged prototype through its paces. He got behind the wheel to show her how to spin it. He claimed he had lost control of the 2.5-ton vehicle, and the rear end slammed into Sobeck, killing her. Panicked, Rathbun dug a grave with his hands and abandoned the body. He said he was so traumatized, he couldn't remember where he'd buried her. Police didn't believe this sudden change of story. But with nothing more to go on, they couldn't refute his account. Flimsier alibis have held up in court. Investigators were not about to let that happen. The case entered its next phase, to find the flaws in Rathbun's story. Police got hold of the car. Unfortunately, it had been detailed at least twice since Rathbun borrowed it. Investigators hoped that some evidence survived the thorough cleaning. The first task was to search for signs of impact. LA County criminalist Heidi Robbins didn't find any.
The initial examination revealed no such evidence on the exterior of the car. Being that it was a prototype, it was a brand new vehicle right off the line, so it was very clean, which is really not what we're used to looking at as forensic scientists or criminalists. The vehicle it didn't have a scratch on it. There wasn't a dent to be seen.
Perhaps the victim had been run over, not struck. The vehicle was placed on a lift. Again, the car was clean.
We didn't see any type of blood or tissue or fiber evidence at all associated with the exterior or undercarriage of that vehicle.
The next step was to examine the vehicle's interior. Although the leather seating looked pristine, it was not. Blood residue was found in the crevice between the seat cushions and had stained the stitching. Tests showed that it matched Sobeck's blood type. 4 long blonde hairs were collected and shown to have belonged to her. Robbins noticed that one of the doors had a deep dent in it. It seemed that a struggle may have occurred inside. The marks inside the car suggested a tale far different from Rathbun's, but the whole story couldn't be told without Sobeck's body, and Rathbun had conveniently forgotten where it was. In custody, he tried to commit suicide, asserting that it was all a mistake. He wrote in his own blood that he never meant to hurt anyone. The act could be read as either despair or cunning calculation. In an apparent attempt to prove his sincerity, 8 days after Linda Sobeck had disappeared, Rathbun recalled where he had buried her. He directed the search party to a steep ravine, 6,000 feet up, 40 miles from the site of the photo shoot. Buried more than a week, the remains would probably yield few clues about the factors that led to her death.
It's always been my contention that Rathbun decided to contribute to our efforts on the day that he did because he felt that the body would be so decomposed that we wouldn't be able to determine those factors.
For Detective Robinson, Rathbun's confession and suicide attempt didn't ring true. To him, the photographer was artfully controlling the investigation, meting out information too little, too late. His sudden recollection of the burial site was the latest example. Supervised by a forensic anthropologist, Robin's team carefully removed the body. Each rock from the top of the grave was numbered and cataloged. Inch by inch, soil was lifted from the grave, then sifted and analyzed. After 8 hours, investigators had their most crucial piece of evidence. 2 feet down, they found Sobeck. Much to their surprise, the elements had spared her.
There was very little degradation, and I think due to the coldness and that altitude and the ravine that she was buried in had such minimal amount of sun exposure, she essentially was refrigerated for those 9 days.
Investigators surveyed the body. Had the victim been struck by a car, she would have had knee-level injuries. Her legs showed no broken bones or abrasions, but they did bear severe ligature marks. It appeared she'd been bound around the ankles. The condition of her clothes also suggested something more than a luckless accident and hasty burial.
Most women are probably comfortable wearing a zip top somewhere maybe in the center of their chest. And Linda's clothing was zipped all the way up to the base of her neck. I thought that's a very unnatural position, and to me, when you see clothing that has a bit of an unnatural position, it indicates the possibility that there may have been some redress or some alteration of the clothing.
The unnatural position of her clothes suggested that Rathbun had dressed her, possibly after her death. And apparently, by trying to wipe away evidence, Rathbun inadvertently created a second clue that revealed he wasn't telling the full story.
She was a model. She wore makeup. She was on a photo shoot. And when she was recovered from that grave, there was a complete absence of any makeup or any residues thereof that we could detect in the crime scene. And that concerned me also.
The condition of her clothing, makeup, and the marks around her ankles suggested that the victim wasn't just standing around before she died. Something else was going on, and it pointed to murder. Linda Sobeck was photographed for the last time on the autopsy table. From marks on her body, the medical examiner could tell that she had been smothered. Hemorrhaging in the eyes showed the breath was literally squeezed out of her, and she hadn't gone without a struggle. Her wrist was sprained. She had been tied up. The physical evidence shattered Rathbun's story of a car accident. As the case went to trial, a first-degree murder charge seemed inevitable, but Rathbun wasn't finished. In a bid for a manslaughter conviction, he offered another account of what happened. His new version explained away all of the evidence. In what was now Rathbun's third rendition, he claimed that Sobeck began to undress and strike erotic poses. He said she was a tease. She became upset when he took pictures of her. He set the camera aside and they started kissing, but she wouldn't let it go further. After things cooled down and she got dressed, Rathbun showed her how to make the car spin. But he was too reckless. He thought he hit and killed her. but she'd only stumbled trying to get clear. She cut her face when she fell. Rathbun told authorities he put her in the car to take her to the hospital. She became hysterical, fighting with him and threatening a lawsuit. He tried to restrain her with a bear hug, but she only grew more agitated and more violent. As a last resort, he sat on her. She finally grew quiet. Then he realized she wasn't breathing. He pulled her out of the car to try to revive her, but she was dead. To explain the ligature marks, Rathbun said he then bound the model's ankles to better maneuver the unwieldy body back into the vehicle. He then buried her. It was a colorful story, but once again, it felt too contrived.
I felt that in trying to answer every piece of evidence that the prosecution had presented, he sort of built a patchwork quilt that wasn't real square at the edges. It just didn't have the right form to it.
If Rathbun could sell this fabrication to the jury, he'd likely get off with manslaughter. To prove his case, Rathbun provided the court with 5 rolls of film from the photo shoot. He explained that he had left them in the desert after the victim was killed. He had his brother retrieve them for him. 4 of the rolls showed Sobeck modeling, but the 5th roll was almost unrecognizable. Rathbun explained that it contained the intimate photos of Linda Sobeck that proved she was teasing him. But in the heat of the moment, he'd grabbed a roll he'd already shot. Not realizing, he took pictures of Linda Sobeck over pictures of the Lexus interior. The harsh desert climate also had apparently affected the rolls, ruining the emulsion. Rathbun presented 13 distorted images of a woman in pornographic poses, double exposed over a car interior. And along with them, he served up a modified version of what happened. This version better explained the condition of the victim's clothes and makeup.
At this point in time, the facts of the story changed. We had another version of the truth come out at this point, and it was suggested that her death actually resulted not from a vehicle this time, but from this consensual sexual activity that had gotten out of hand, a little too rough, and accidentally resulted in her death. These photographs were introduced to prove this latest version of the truth.
Investigators set out to prove the photos were fakes. Detective Robinson felt the pictures were too damaged to be conclusive. He needed to determine if the Lexus and the woman in these photos were really who Rathbun said they were. He learned that several weeks before borrowing the Lexus, Rathbun had photographed a 1998 Oldsmobile prototype. The detective requested Rathbun's pictures of that car's interior from the manufacturer. Heidi Robbins brought the double-exposed images and the Oldsmobile interiors to the National Law Enforcement and Corrections Technology Center in El Segundo, California, for comparison. The agency provides sophisticated forensic imaging technology for law enforcement. The images were scanned into a high-speed computer and enhanced with graphics software. Before they could make sense, engineer Bill Repetto digitally enhanced their contrast, shadow detail, and color.
The films are in really bad shape. In fact, a lot of the emulsion is missing. So the detectives really didn't have a full shot of the entire dashboard. Using our equipment, we were able to alter the contrast, do some sharpening, look for features that were hard to do in the conventional photographic process, but we can do it in real time on a computer. So I guess you're interested in finding out, is that a body part or is that part of the dashboard?
Once the pictures were sharpened, Repetto sized and overlaid the Oldsmobile dashboard atop the damaged negative. His goal was to see if the car in the photos was really the Lexus that Sobeck died in, or if it was the Oldsmobile.
That you can match up things like the speedometer dial, the radius of the steering wheel. Unfortunately, we can't see this pattern, the logo on the steering wheel, but it matches up pretty good. I mean, you work with this just a few minutes and it's pretty darn obvious this is not a Lexus. This is an Oldsmobile.
Repetto next had to eliminate Linda Sobeck as the faceless model. He compared the dress Sobeck wore at the photo shoot to a portion of lace shown in the double-exposed images. Because lace patterns repeat, it only takes a fragment of the material to point out a mismatch.
Now in this image, you can see that there's a definite pattern here. There's a boot-shaped mark, you know, a vertical feature, and it bends over to the left, and that's repeated up here.
The lace patterns were inconsistent. So were comparisons between Sobeck's anatomy and the model in the photos. Rathbun's latest account was disproven.
The defense, on their fourth and final version of the truth, when the defendant took the stand, had to go up and explain all the physical evidence findings and the circumstances surrounding the death. And in his testimony, he did initially state that this was the Lexus and that this was in fact Linda Sobeck. And it was very powerful rebuttal testimony when the jury could see for themselves that not only was this not the Lexus, but this clearly was not Linda Sobeck.
Once again, the facts contradicted Rathbun's story. The jury didn't buy any of Rathbun's tales. Charles Rathbun was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Almost from the start, the photographer was the focal point of the Sobeck case. But when murder is more random, investigators must take a wider view. In Beaverton, Oregon, on the morning after Valentine's Day, 1981, police were called to a townhouse in a quiet neighborhood. There, they found the body of 18-year-old Julianne Reitz. She'd been shot in the back of the head with two .38 caliber bullets, apparently while running for her life. The medical examiner determined that she died between 3 and 4 a.m. As investigators processed the crime scene, Detective Dave Bishop gathered the first important clue.
The telltale signs were that the victim knew whoever killed her. The door was unlocked, the stereo was on, there was a couple of wine glasses in the sink.
Police searched the townhouse for any traces the killer may have left behind. No fingerprints were lifted, but technicians did recover hair and fiber samples. Upstairs, they found signs of a struggle.
The bed was just totally tore apart, sheets everywhere, and it was just, I mean, it was obvious that, you know, there was a war up there.
Stains on the sheets showed that a man with type B blood had had sexual relations with the victim. Within a week of the murder, detectives questioned over 150 of the victim's friends and acquaintances. Several mentioned an older man who had recently resurfaced from her past. He worked at a local club and dated her once or twice the year before. Reitz thought he was a little overbearing and decided they should just be friends. His name was Randall Woodfield. Randy had been an All-American athlete and was drafted by the Green Bay Packers for a brief stint in the NFL. He was an affable, fun-loving guy, but he was no Boy Scout. Police learned that he was on probation, having served 3 years for robbing joggers in Portland. Police arranged an interview with him. He vaguely remembered the victim, but said he hadn't seen her for months. Investigators found him candid and agreeable.
You know, if you didn't know him, he would be the guy next door. I mean, he was, and pleasant to talk to. Not, he was very little profanity, soft-spoken.
Woodfield was forthcoming about his past, but suspicions were raised when he refused to submit hair samples or take a polygraph test. 7 grueling hours of interrogation produced little information, but managed to wear him down. He finally agreed to let police search his apartment.
I told the detectives the first thing that that when we went into the house to grab was the sheets off his bed, and because that was going to give us the hair and blood.
Investigators got the hair sample they wanted from Woodfield's sheets. They also found a .32 caliber bullet and a roll of athletic tape in his gym bag. Ordinarily, these items meant nothing. Now, police weren't so sure. Athletic tape was a crucial clue in a rash of unsolved rapes and murders that had been occurring along Interstate 5 for more than 2 months. Detectives wondered if they were onto something bigger than an isolated homicide. Suspicions intensified when investigators checked Woodfield's phone bill to see if he'd called Julie Reitz.
He was living with a young lady at that time, actually, who owned the house, and he was renting a portion of the house. I said, do you know whether or not he's made any phone calls to Beaverton? And her response was, probably, because I just got the phone bill today and it was over $200 and some. So he's called everybody.
He obtained a copy of Woodfield's phone bill from his housemate. When he was on the road, Woodfield liked to stay in touch with former girlfriends, charging calls to his housemate's phone. Bishop searched the bill for Reitz's number. He didn't find it, but the other numbers on the bill formed a chilling pattern.
But all of a sudden, as I'm going through this, it became very obvious that what I'm seeing is scary. It's the map of I-5.
Beginning in December 1980, a predator hunted along Interstate 5 over 3 states, robbing roadside establishments, sodomizing and killing the young women who worked there. A task force had been set up to track the killer's movements, to gather the paltry clues. He was rigorously consistent, preying on strangers, leaving no prints.
Dark-haired, dark-eyed, described as handsome.
He often
young
wore
man,
false
athletic
beards
build.
and hoods.
About 6'2".
On January 18, 1981, 1 month before Reitz was killed, police and rescue were called to an office building in Salem, Oregon, several miles down I-5 from where Julie Reitz was killed.
What do you got?
Lisa Garcia and Sherry Hull had been cleaning an office when an intruder slipped in. The women were sexually assaulted. Both were shot in the back of the head. Astonishingly, Garcia never lost consciousness. Though groggy and confused, she was able to dial 911. A twist of fate had kept 2 bullets from entering Garcia's brain. Hull was not so fortunate. She died at the hospital. Detectives analyzed the office crime scene. They collected hair and fiber samples and 2 .32 caliber slugs. The evidence and the method of attack matched the profile of a killer who'd been creating a one-man crime wave. Oregon detectives believed they may have stumbled onto the trail of the serial killer who prowled Interstate 5. The I-5 killer's victims were always attractive young women with long hair. He would often bind their wrists with the same brand of white athletic tape. And when he killed, it was with bullets to the back of the head. Many robbery victims had caught a glimpse of him, but Lisa Garcia was the only one who had seen him kill. He was described as a white male in his 20s with dark, bushy hair. He wore an adhesive bandage on his nose, probably to distract his victims from noting his features. But police still didn't know who he was. He had committed more than 20 acts of rape and robbery and was already suspected of killing 5 women. Julie Reitz made it 6. Like the office building Garcia was shot in, Reitz's house was along the I-5 corridor. Garcia gave the I-5 killer a face. Reitz gave him a possible name, Randall Woodfield. The blood and hair samples gathered from Woodfield's apartment, bolstered by the paper trail of his phone bill, gave authorities enough evidence to go to Woodfield's home and arrest him for suspicion of murder as the I-5 killer. But to build their case, they needed as much evidence as they could muster. Lisa Garcia, the sole survivor of the I-5 killer's murderous attacks, was called in to identify him.
Either in the yes or the no column if it's not the mayor on this sheet that I've given.
Do what I say and you won't get hurt. Don't call the police. Where's the back room?
Thank you.
A lineup was arranged. Participants were asked to recite statements made by the I-5 killer.
Stand up to the microphone, please.
The circumstantial evidence against Randall Woodfield was strong.
Indicated that are underlined.
His physical description and movements matched the killer's profile. His housemate confirmed that he was out of the house on the nights the killer struck. The hairs from Woodfield's bedroom matched the strands found in Julie Reitz's bed and in the office building where Lisa Garcia was attacked. He had type B blood.
Do what I say and you won't get hurt. Don't call the police.
All the police needed was a credible eyewitness.
Do what I say and you won't get hurt.
Lisa Garcia unequivocally picked Woodfield from the lineup. It was the voice, she said, that clinched it. If the bullet found in his apartment could be linked to the .32 caliber slug removed from Lisa Garcia's skull, the case against Woodfield would be a lock. But police faced two problems. The single bullet found in his possession hadn't been fired, so it bore no marks that would enable police to compare it with a bullet from any crime scene. And worse, they had no gun to test fire it with. Traditional ballistics testing would be useless. Instead, investigators needed to compare the bullets atom by atom. At Oregon State University's Radiation Center, analyst Michael Conradi uses nuclear power to put criminals behind bars.
They called us up and described the evidence that they had and asked us if we could help them with that. We told them that that was an ideal situation for activation analysis.
Conradi received 4 bullet fragments from crimes police suspected were the work of the I-5 killer. He was also given the bullet found in Woodfield's gym bag. His job was to see if they matched. Manufacturers produced bullets in batches. Each tank of lead contains different amounts of the trace elements silver, copper, tin, antimony, and arsenic. A process called neutron activation analysis allows scientists to compare minute levels of these elements. This enables them to identify bullets produced in the same batch. Conradi cuts a sample from the bullet, flattens it into a wafer, and cleans it in nitric acid to remove contaminants. A pneumatic tube sends it on its 16-foot underwater journey to the core of a nuclear reactor. At the core, the sample is bombarded with subatomic particles called neutrons. Some of the atoms in the sample absorb some of these neutrons. The sample becomes unstable, releasing the extra neutrons in a burst of energy, in a process known as radioactive decay. Every element releases this radiation in its own unique and consistent pattern. By reading the pattern, the element and its quantity can be identified. Once the container is shuttled back to the lab, Conradi has to hurry before the radioactivity diminishes. Otherwise, he'll have nothing to analyze.
I have a minute to get the sample out, decapsulated, and on the detector.
He places the disc on a computerized sensor. The system produces a pattern showing the relative amounts of each trace element in his sample. If the unfired shot from Randall Woodfield's apartment matched the slug removed from Garcia, the suspect wouldn't be able to dodge a conviction.
Gary, you got the IR for the Woodfield
The samples yielded an identical pattern. Neutron activation analysis proved that the bullet fragments from the crime scene and the bullet from Woodfield's apartment came from the same batch. The bullet from his apartment matched the one taken from Lisa Garcia. Fiber, hair, and telephone records tied him to several other crime scenes. Woodfield was a sly, methodical killer who prepared for his attacks with a ritualistic intensity. His pattern was as consistent as it was deadly. His formula for targeting random victims made him seem unstoppable. But then he broke his routine and turned on someone he knew. That ultimately led to his capture. Based on the evidence, investigators assembled the final hours of Julie Reitz.
Mr. Woodfield would come to her house at approximately 3 in the morning, contact her. He had been drinking.
Hey, Julie.
Hi.
How you doing?
Asked if he could crash there for a while.
Just thought I'd come by to see you.
Yeah.
She apparently agreed. They had a couple of glasses of wine. She put on some coffee.
Is that okay? Because that's really all I have.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Because I think that's all I have. Here, it's in here somewhere. Just give me one.
At that time, he pulled the gun, took her upstairs,
No, what are you doing? What is?
raped her, sodomized her, and then coming down the stairs, shot her twice in the back of the head.
Armed with an imposing forensics case, the prosecution was able to prove that Randall Woodfield was the I-5 killer. He was found guilty of murder, attempted murder, and 2 counts of sodomy. He is currently serving life plus 165 years in the Oregon State Penitentiary. A killer's motivations often lie beyond the scope of forensic investigators. Detectives must satisfy themselves with learning how, when, and by whom a murder was committed. On the afternoon of April 3rd, 1985, a bridge club convened at the Boonesboro, Virginia home of Derek and Nancy Haysom. Though both their cars were in the driveway, neither 72-year-old Derek nor his wife answered the door. Fearing trouble, the guests called a family friend who came over with a spare key. They were alarmed. Derek never missed their weekly game, certainly not when he was hosting. Inside, investigators from the Bedford County Sheriff's Department were faced with a gruesome scene.
Anybody call the coroner yet?
They determined that Derek and Nancy Haysom had been killed the previous weekend. Their throats were slashed, their bodies marred by numerous wounds. Detectives eliminated robbery as a motive for the killing. There was no forced entry, no valuables or money taken. The floors were smeared with blood. Investigators wondered whether the odd patterns pointed to a cult killing. Forensics expert Steve Rush was one of the first on the scene.
The entire floor had been wiped in blood. All this kind of took me back because it was so unusual that somebody would, at that time I thought, play in the blood.
As investigators scoured the scene for evidence, they realized that the cryptic swirls were actually the work of a murderer trying to cover his tracks. They feared he may have succeeded all too well. Normally, a messy crime scene yields many clues, but the scene at the Haysom house in Virginia wasn't the aftermath of a sloppy killer. When the criminal noticed that he was leaving footprints, he removed his shoes and camouflaged the tracks. A single print survived. The oak flooring on which it appeared was sent to the lab for analysis. At the Virginia Division of Forensic Science, Dr. Robert Hallett uses footprints to stop criminals in their tracks. He works from life-size photos to keep the original prints free from damage. From telltale weave patterns, he could see that the print from the Haysom house came from a foot in a sock. A bare foot would have made his job easier, because feet, like hands, bear tiny grooves called friction ridges. A print expert relies on these ridges to precisely match a footprint to a person.
They can make a positive identification to the exclusion of anyone else. They could say that that print was made by the person who gave them a known impression. That's not possible in this examination.
Hallett would have to base his analysis simply on the foot's anatomy. Though the photograph from the Haysom house indicated that the foot had been dragged, Hallett was pleased with the evidence.
The impression is complete. I have a heel, I have an arch, I have a metatarsal pad or ball of the foot, and I have 5 toes that are distinctly shown. And that is considered to be an excellent photograph to work with.
But until Hallett had something to compare it against, the bloody sock print would be useless. He would have to wait for a suspect to surface. Despite the lack of hard evidence, lead investigator Lieutenant Ricky Gardner was already forming an impression of the assailant.
It was obvious from the get-go that whoever performed or committed the murders was very angry with both Mr. and Ms. Haysom.
The Haysoms appeared to have known their assailant and had even shared a meal. Stale remnants of food and wine lingered at 2 place settings, but 3 chairs, not 2, appeared to have been pushed back abruptly from the table. The Haysoms were killed by someone they didn't fear, but should have. Gardner's team searched for any small clue they could find, any hint of the killer. They tried to elicit latent fingerprints by sealing the house and pumping it full of superglue fumes. Hours passed as they laboriously analyzed a house full of fingerprints. But out of the thousands lifted from every surface, no suspicious ones could be found. The killer left no fingerprints. Now investigators were out for blood, hoping to track the killer's movements by the bloody trail he left. To reveal subtle traces, the forensics team used luminol. The chemical combines with blood, even drops imperceptible to the human eye. When the light goes out, the luminol-enhanced blood glows under an alternate light source and filter.
The luminol indicated to us one person coming out of the house, going down to the driveway, and appearing to get into an automobile. These were photographed and swabs were taken and was identified as blood.
The victim's blood, tracked on the killer's socks, revealed only one set of prints. It confirmed a lone assassin. A more intense search continued inside to see what else the blood might reveal. Once again, they pored over every inch of the house, looking for telltale clues of the killer's movements. Through most of the house, the luminol told investigators nothing they didn't already know. Then, in the bathroom, the chemical revealed one single drop separated from the rest. The killer failed to completely wash it away. Detectives supposed it came from the killer's own wound. Testing showed that the droplet was type O. It could not have come from Derek, who was type A, nor Nancy, who was type AB. If the killer had bled elsewhere in the house, his blood would have been mixed with the victim's and been rendered unidentifiable. The careful killer had left a vague trail, but no hints about the motive. Investigators questioned friends and family, asking each where they'd been on the weekend of the murder and checking every story. No suspect surfaced. They hoped that the Haysom's daughter, Elizabeth, could provide information, since she had only recently left home. A freshman at the University of Virginia, she was an extremely bright young woman educated in Swiss and English boarding schools. She described the Haysoms as warm and loving parents. She couldn't imagine who would want them dead. Elizabeth said that she and her boyfriend had been in Washington, D.C. when the murders occurred. She was able to provide movie stubs from the weekend. In checking her alibi, Gardner obtained their hotel and car rental receipts. The documents raised more questions than they answered. The car rental receipt showed they'd driven 669 miles, but the round trip from Charlottesville to D.C. is only 240 miles.
when I went to Charlottesville to talk to Elizabeth, I confronted her with the fact that we had learned of this, and she stated that they had done a lot of traveling and had gotten lost on several occasions. And I'd say, you have to get major loss to have that many miles on a car.
It was inconceivable that they racked up an additional 429 miles in 2 days of city driving, unless a trip to Boonesboro was added to the equation. Gardner contacted Elizabeth's boyfriend to hear his side. Jens Soering, a German citizen and son of a diplomat, shared Elizabeth's intellect and international background. The Jefferson scholar hardly seemed the violent type. Like Elizabeth, he said they had put the extra miles on the car when they got lost while sightseeing. Suspicions peaked when Jens refused to supply a blood sample or foot impression, claiming his involvement might endanger his father's diplomatic status. Police arranged a second interview with Jens. He never showed. Instead, Elizabeth's half-brother found a note in Elizabeth's apartment. In the note, Jens explained that he and Elizabeth, weary of the investigation, had left town. He asserted his innocence, claiming that he was not a violent person. A search was conducted. Jens and Elizabeth could not be found.
Well, since you've read, you already know. They're not coming back here.
Several days later, Jens's car was located 340 miles away at Newark Airport. Detectives believed that the couple had fled to Europe. With their international backgrounds, Elizabeth and Jens would have no trouble covering their tracks abroad. Interpol was notified, but had no recourse. No charges had been filed, no evidence against them had been gathered. The investigation came to a screeching halt. All police could hope for was that one day soon, the couple would slip up and resurface. Seven months passed. The prime suspects had fled to Europe. Then, in May 1986, a British detective searched the flat of a young couple who'd been arrested for check scamming. Browsing through a box of their love letters, he realized that they were guilty of more than fraud. The lovers had planned a murder. The letters and diary told a far different story than either Jens or Elizabeth had shared with police back in Virginia. Elizabeth had loathed her parents and their smothering involvement in her life. She particularly resented their intent to separate her from Jens. She wanted them dead. Would it be possible to hypnotize my parents, she wrote, do voodoo on them, will them to death? Why won't my parents just lie down and die? I despise them so much. Jens wrote that he was willing to help concoct a scheme to pull it off. A constable from Scotland Yard contacted Detective Gardner.
And he says, I understand you may be interested in Jens Soering or Elizabeth Haysom. And I'm going, yeah? All the time, you know, I'm sliding up in the chair a little bit more. And he says, were her parents murdered?
Gardner caught the next plane to England to confront Jens and Elizabeth with their own words. Elizabeth, struck with remorse, admitted she knew about the murders beforehand, but didn't commit them.
I think that was...
I'd never seen it.
She returned to Virginia for trial. Jens admitted killing the Haysoms, but as a German citizen, he hoped to get his case moved to Germany, where he would be tried as a minor. If found guilty there, he'd do only a few years' time. Then he could be reunited with Elizabeth.
He advised me that he was ready to tell me the truth, and he just started with when they met in the fall of, he and Elizabeth met in the fall of '84. They fell in love, and one thing led to another.
Jens told Gardner that he was so in love with Elizabeth, he'd do anything for her, even kill.
I mean, he was smitten, obviously, by Elizabeth. I mean, this was probably, if not the one of the first relationship that he had ever had. And I mean, she had manipulated him into the feeling that, you're my future, and we'll spend the rest of our lives together, and you're my only love. And he went for it. He fell for it.
But back in Virginia, Elizabeth turned on her lover. She portrayed Jens as a bloodthirsty psychotic who killed without much urging. She'd lived in a state of terror afterwards, she said, fearing that Jens would kill her if she went to the police. On August 24, 1987, Elizabeth pleaded guilty to being an accessory before the fact. She thought she'd get off easy, but she was sentenced to 90 years in prison. Jens fought extradition for 3 years. Then the United Kingdom agreed to extradite him when Virginia promised it would not seek the death penalty if he were found guilty. When it was clear Jens was to face hard time in the States, he changed his story, pinning the murders on Elizabeth. He claimed that the roles of killer and accessory were reversed. Elizabeth had killed her parents while he stayed in Washington. He'd lied about it until now to protect her. Jens was a good storyteller, but forensics would provide the definitive account. The next step in the Haysom murder investigation took place in the lab, where Elizabeth Haysom and Jens Soering made footprints.
And now I want you to walk through. Be sure all parts are touching. All right, stop. All right, now just walk right on through.
Robert Hallett compared these impressions with the print gathered at the crime scene. Transparencies were made of the prints. Hallett drew parallel lines through each image to compare them. A distinguishing feature appeared on the photograph of the bloody print. The ball of the killer's foot formed a plateau between the second and third toes. Following the line, Hallett found a striking similarity with Soering's footprint.
It exactly touched those same two positions on the impression of Jens Soering. However, when that parallel line, keeping it equidistant all the way across, came to this position for Elizabeth Haysom, the pad, the metatarsal pad, was significantly below, quite a bit below.
Elizabeth's print didn't have this feature and was eliminated. Hallett tested Jens's print further.
This is the impression that we're trying to determine as to who made. And I've placed an overlay over it, the right foot of Jens Soering, placement of the toes, metatarsal pad, the ball of the foot, the arch, and the heel, all exactly match. There were no differences.
In Hallett's opinion, Jens Soering had left the print.
The foot that made that impression was either that foot by Jens Soering or someone that had a foot exactly like his, and I've never seen such a condition to exist.
Next, a sample of Soering's blood was tested against a single droplet found on the floor of the Haysoms' bathroom. They matched. Both were type O. Soering couldn't get around the evidence in the case. A single sock print and one wayward drop of blood indisputably put him in the house on the night of the murder. His own letters spoke of premeditation.
I'll get it.
At trial, an account of the murder was pieced together. Jens and Elizabeth had met in school, but the Haysoms didn't think Jens was good enough for their daughter. They had been threatening to use their influence to have Jens expelled from the university.
Come on.
Determined to stay together, Jens said, he and Elizabeth made a plan. While she created an alibi in Washington, Jens drove to Boonesboro to kill her parents. They invited him in. He made a final plea to keep dating their daughter. Derek Haysom refused. He swore he'd do everything in his power to keep them apart. That's when Jens lost control. He pulled the knife he'd purchased that day and killed the Haysoms. For his crimes, Jens Soering was found guilty of first-degree murder and given 2 life sentences. Forensic science can't explain a killer's lethal obsessions, but detectives and the scientists they rely on are driven by obsessions of their own. In the field or in the lab, they are on a mission to stop killers, no matter how long it takes.